Sweet revenge. There are some things to clean up, but Washington wins the Apple Cup 59-24.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Armon Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. He writes with me over at Huskies Wire. Thanks for making this your first watch or first listen of the day, as we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And this episode is brought to you by Mazda. Like our players, we sweat every detail, because when you make every move count, pulling off the unexpected is only the beginning. Stay tuned later for highlights in this week's Moving the Game Forward, Mazda, Move and Be Moved. Just a quick reminder to all you everydayers out there, wherever you're getting this podcast, YouTube, Spotify, Apple News, Games on Music, wherever that might be, click that subscribe button, click that little bell, as well as numbers when we post new show or when we go live like this. And if you're on the audio only side of things, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review, as it does help this show out a lot. Now, Lars, this is our first live show of the year. We love doing these. Washington is coming off the first road win of Jedd Fisch's tenure, so we want to get to all that at the end. We want to hear from some of the everydayers, so drop your comments here on the YouTube side of things. We'll answer a couple questions and get to a couple of your takes as well at the very end. We need to talk about the defense really struggling in this game, but the offense, take out the kneel down at the end of the game, because that doesn't count. Washington's offense was perfect in scoring yet again.
I was going to say, do we know what the longest streak is for consecutive drives with a score at this point? I don't know. If
we will find out by Monday.
I guarantee you, because we know Jeff is on his game. But yeah, it really speaks to even Grady hitting the 51-yarder. Everything offensively and production-wise when it comes to finding the end zone is clicking. Jonah Coleman does it again, double digits in terms of, multi-touchdown game. DeMond proves kind of what we said at the beginning of the year, where he could be one of, if not the best players in the Big Ten when it comes to total yardage and things like that. He finds the end zone both in the air and on the ground. Denzel Boston, that first touchdown was I think he still should have had the deep ball, but that was on DeMond for not getting it out about a second and a half too early. And really, it just comes down to, even with the sacks and everything like that, Washington was clearly the better team, especially offensively.
No, absolutely. And this is something where let's just run through these numbers for the big three, as you will, really quickly. DeMond completed 16 of his 19 passes that's 82% for 298 yards and 4 touchdowns. You could tell Jedd wanted to get him to 300. Just like it was very, very obvious. Jedd was fully aware what the most points scored in an Apple Cup was by one team, and he broke that today. Added 88 yards and a touchdown on the ground. Certainly was very easily over 100 yards. If you take out the sack adjusted numbers, Jonah only 59 yards on the ground or 2 touchdowns. I have something I want to get to there in just a minute, but 6 catches for 104 yards and a touchdown. With my quick research as we wanted to go live here, believe that's the most receiving yards in any game in his career. Denzel, 6 catches, 107 yards and 2 touchdowns. This is, as we were saying on the show a few weeks ago, this is the best trio of offensive weapons in the Big Ten. And it's one of those things where I wanted to mention with Jonah here is it was very clear Wazoo's plan of attack on defense was do not let him get outside the tackle box, was just key in on him every single play, and whatever else happens from there happens. And it really is so great to just continue to see him thrive. He's leading the FBS with 10 total touchdowns now this season. This is just a guy who you can rely on week in and week out. And I don't think opponent, defense, whatever it might be, I don't think any of that matters with Jonah, where obviously we don't expect him to go for, 173, quick math here, total yards every single week and 3 touchdowns. But knowing that he has that ability just frees up so much for this offense.
It really does, especially when, not to get ahead of ourselves here, but you look at the next opponent coming to Husky Stadium, now looming larger. That would be a massive statement. Obviously, we don't expect him, like you said, to get to that level. But the fact that he finds the end zone, I think, is what we're really looking for here. Because, 60-ish yards, call it that. I know, obviously, it's 53 or whatever it was. But the point being that you don't need the yardage if you have the production on the scoreboard. There we go. When you look at it from the perspective,
I was going to say, you can say hello to your cat there.
I was going to say, I don't know what my cat, I think, had some thoughts with Jonah as well here. But you look at it and say, especially why Jonah came back this season, it was to be productive. It was to get Washington to where they deserve to be. And he did that. I mean, if you think about when those touchdowns came, it was 21-7 when he got on that first touchdown. I believe it was in the third quarter,
He
midway
scored the next
through.
one as well. Yeah.
And then you get that icing on the cake 34-yard reception where I looked down at my phone and I looked back up and I thought it was his third touchdown run. I was like, oh, heck yeah, he gets another trio here. But it ended up being a touchdown pass from Devon. And still, all that is to say, no matter how he gets the ball, he gets in the end zone. And I don't think him or Jedd cares anything else.
So one thing you said there that I want to hit on, because then I think we need to discuss the offensive line here as well, because it's just such a big part of this offense's success as a whole. But one thing is, you said he came back to be productive. And I think that's certainly very accurate, especially when you look at last year's just class of running backs in the NFL draft. Yeah, you want to make sure that you can come back and have another really strong year of production. But he came back to do so much more than that. He came back to prove that he can continue to be a leader, that he can change his body, that he can pass protect with the best of them, that he can be a really good pass catcher and run a complete route tree. Because these are all things he's continued to share with us throughout spring practice, throughout fall, is that these were all things that went into his decision, which is great. And he wanted to get his degree on top of all of that, which is just fantastic as well. But you look at one of the biggest reasons for his success. It's changing his body. It's getting more explosive. It's getting faster. It's all the athletic changes that he made on top of continuing to learn the playbook. But it's also this offensive line has improved tremendously ahead of him. And there were still a couple of plays where obviously Damon took a few sacks today. I think at least one of those were on him holding the ball too long. And there are some things that you can clean up there. But it's so clear that this unit is just night and day ahead of where it was last year, which I know, hard-hitting analysis, which was the theme on Twitter for me today. But you look at this unit as a whole, and there's just so much to like. I feel like we're going to continue to see more of Packy Fee now as the weeks go on here. But you just look at this unit as a whole. Again, it's just so much better, and everything is so much more well blocked. And Jonah, even though we know he's one of the best in the nation at picking up yards after contact, this unit has made it so he doesn't have to work that hard to get up to full speed and get into the open field where he's at his best.
Yeah, really, it's about consistency. I think that's where we're seeing it come to fruition. It's consistency along the offensive line with the blocking and creating holes, consistently having Jonah break those tackles where I know the first touchdown I credited 4 Wazoo defenders trying to tackle him. I mean, call it a half on that goal line part where they were like trying to both tackle him. They'd probably give him a half tackle for each one of those. But it's to say that, and then you add that consistency finding the end zone. It's all of those things coming together. And that's really what Jonah and Jedd both needed from each other this season, where the players are being put in the right position in terms of the play call, everything like that. We haven't really questioned Jedd's play calling this season. And I know that's kind of obviously 3 games into the season, like you said, hard hitting analysis here. Talk to me after Ohio State. But for me, that was kind of important because when you get those right calls, it's because you're keeping the offense in rhythm. Damon keeping the team on schedule, those type of things. All of it factors together. And if they can consistently keep up this offensive line performance, there's no reason they're not a top 5 offense in the Big Ten at least.
So you mentioned keeping everything on schedule. I have it right here in front of me. What was Washington's conversion percentage? Let's say it that way on third down today.
6 to 7, right?
They were 8 of 9, which is 88.9, which is, again, just something we didn't see last season. And a lot of that comes from having a just tremendous go-to guy in Denzel Boston who can move the change. It's Damon Williams with his legs. It's having Jonah Coleman in these, when you're in 3rd and short, time after time after time. It's 3rd and 3 and 3rd and 4 instead of 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9. And credit to Damon. 100%. Some of those 3rd and longs today, he made it look so easy. The pitch and catch early on with Denzel Boston, and then just every single play on 3rd down. It's one of those things where last year it's, oh man, like, are they going to be able to get off the field here or stay on the field here? What's going on with this? I don't feel that way this season. And it's credit to all of these guys. And again, before we move on here and get to the defense, credit to the offensive line. It just looks so much better where, again, there were 1 or 2 plays today where it's okay. You can clean this up. You can clean that up, but that's still, a positive. Again, as we continue to move forward, I feel like this offensive line will continue to settle in. Next week, as you said, is going to be a massive challenge. But moving forward, I just feel a lot of confidence in this unit continuing to grow and develop and be an above average unit in the Big Ten, which is all you can ask for from this team. But let's move over to the defensive side of the ball where there were some major concerns. And we'll get there right after a message from our good friends over at Mazda. This episode is brought to you by Mazda's Moving the Game Forward, for those who believe it's not just about playing the game, it's about redefining it. There are moments that do more than put points on the board. They move crowds, move culture, and keep moving the game forward. This week's moment that moved the game forward was Alex McLaughlin's pick six. You know I had to get there before we talk about the defense, because Alex McLaughlin, this defense really was struggling today, and he came up clutch with 2 interceptions, and that one in the fourth quarter really just felt like, whew, you could take a nice long breath, and everything from that point on just felt like Washington was in complete and total control of the game. When you follow what moves you, the unexpected is only the beginning. And just like there's more to every highlight, there's more to a Mazda vehicle. Mazda, move and be moved. We've also got a message from our good friends over at Wayfair. The weather's cooling down, the days are getting shorter, and that has me wanting to make my home feel even cozier. And when it comes to cozifying your space this fall, Wayfair is the place to go. Wayfair has everything you need to set the mood for the season, whether it's comfy recliners, warm bedding, autumn decor, or even an espresso machine, so you can make your favorite latte at home. What I love most about Wayfair is the variety. Wayfair has options for every style and budget, so you don't have to compromise, and the delivery is fast, free, and hassle-free, which makes a huge difference when you're refreshing your home. Cozify your space with Wayfair's curated collection of easy, affordable fall updates, from comfy recliners to cozy bedding and autumn decor. You'll find it all for way less at wayfair.com. That's Wayfair.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. Lars, let's switch side of the ball here, and we have to start on the negatives. Leroy Bryant, it was not a great day. Obviously, Tacario Davis is out with an injury. I fully expect him back this week from everything that I've heard from just some people around the program and just what the latest has been with his status. He went through a light workout on the field today, and we talked about this last week when Jedd Fisch said that he was questioned before this game. It was, what does the cornerback depth look like? And I want to get to Dylan Robinson in a couple of minutes here, because I could not have been more impressed with what I saw from him today. But it was not a great day for Leroy Bryant. And I don't know if you want to put part of that on him playing in the nickel throughout fall camp after playing on the outside, in the spring a lot. But it's one of those things where this defense is not going to work without Tacario Davis at this point in time.
I think both can remain true. I think they both are kind of separate but equal thoughts there, because I do think there is a part where Leroy, some of those receptions that he allowed, it seemed like he kind of made the wrong break at one point in the route where he would still catch up and kind of be within a couple of yards of the receiver, but it was already too late at that point. And I think being in the nickel, you're only worried about a more condensed space. Being at that outside corner, you got to go deep and follow. So I think, to me, there's part of it there. But then, Tacario being himself, I mean, my God, like Tacario for a reason, people. Like, that's why we saw the difference in gap. But I do think Leroy can get better from this, where we saw him at times last week struggle. And I don't think this is like to write him off in any shape or form. But I do think it was kind of a good reality check to see where is he at best. I do think maybe he's best at the nickel, because I swear we saw Rashawn a little bit outside on a couple of snaps tonight. So I think that I'd be curious to see where the development long-term is. But and again, Dylan Robinson for me, I want you to carry on with this, but that might be why he kind of gets usurped in one of those positions, is because the guys also around him and coming up are pretty dang good too.
So I'm glad you mentioned it like that, because I do feel like that was one of the things with moving Leroy inside, was we know what Dylan Robinson's going to do. And we've talked about this before, where if this December Washington wants to go after another CB1 type in the transfer portal, I don't think I would be super shocked with just the way this rotation is playing out. But Dylan, he comes in after the long pass to Josh Meredith, and he just comes in right away and makes that third down stop. It was 3rd and 2 on that play. That's right. And you just see the size and the physicality really shine through. He gets the punch out a little bit later on Zevi Eckhouse in the fourth quarter. And it's one of those things where, yes, it's those intangibles. And you just are going to watch him continue to grow as the season goes along. Obviously, you don't want to see him in an extended role at any point in time this year, because that means you're dealing with some injuries. But I do think that it still just brings up this depth concern for me, where I was really impressed with the Ephesians price stock today. His tackling was just night and day better than it was last year. I needed to make sure I got that out there. But I look on the other side of the field, and so much of this defense works with Tacario Davis on the field, like you said, but it's not just, the fact that he's just a tremendous press man shutdown corner. It's how much plays off of it, where, again, off the top of your head, when you just, without looking at the stat sheet, how many rushing yards did Washington State have tonight?
Was my over-under prediction right when I said 52 or 56 was going to be the number? I think it's under 50, right?
It's 27. So the run deep, and obviously Wazoo has not necessarily had a great rushing attack this season, but you look at this defense, there was so much that Washington State wanted to do offensively. That was get the ball out, get Zevi Eckhouse out of the pocket, get him away. The defensive line is still doing his job. I thought Zach Durfee looked awesome today. I think he did a really good job just wrecking this Wazoo offensive line, causing pressure, getting in the backfield. UW ended this game with 3 sacks, by the way. I had him at 4 in my bold prediction on Friday. But I look at what this defensive front is doing, and it's doing its job. It's not necessarily always getting home in a timely fashion, but that's part of the point where it's not always going to work out that way. And you want to get the ball out of your hands quickly. But when you have someone who's not just able to make a break on a quick slant and giving up inside leverage and doing things like that, the defense is not going to work to maximum efficiency. And especially when, there are different times where you're doing different things with your pressures and not sending 5 guys after the quarterback and giving him a little bit more time to throw. When you're not able to stay sticky in man coverage like Tacario and Ephesians have proven to do, things are not going to work. And again, there are a lot of things that need to improve, but I think that is what was certainly just emphasized more than anything in this game.
I mean, if anything, it kind of showed that the whole point is to speed up the time, speed up the process of the opposing quarterback and the offense, try to just force them into making quicker decisions because, the guys in the back end can, shine brightest. And we saw that from Alex and a few other guys today. And so I agree with that assessment because you're not always going to have 3, 4, 5 sacks in a game. That's just not really, at least with the guys they have right now, you're not going to count on that. They have the potential for that, but it's more about just causing the havoc and letting the result happen. I think that's kind of how I would surmise the day today, where you mentioned Armon getting his first sack, a couple other guys getting there. To me, it's also about, tackles for loss, being able to force, decisions, stutter steps and things like that. Where I know Ty got one, I believe Buddah Al-Uqdah got another one as well. And you just kind of look and say, as long as everyone does their job, this is the somewhat of a result you're going to get. Obviously, 24 points, not the greatest, but, when you look at it and think, well, what the offense can do, like what would you put the number at moving forward now that non-conference play is over? What's the number the UW's defense has to hit in terms of points per game allowed to say, if the offense does more than that, we're going to win no matter what?
So I would put it at 28. And I feel like that's high because I feel like Washington's offense at the rate that they've been at just scoring at so far this season, they can get to 30 points a game. I don't think that that's necessarily out of the realm of possibilities, but I want to switch gears here for a little bit because you bring up a bunch of great points. 7 tackles for loss today, by the way, was the number at the end of the night. I want to talk about Alex McLaughlin because we need to make sure that this is mentioned, where obviously after Buddah Al-Uqdah goes down, I want to talk about that a little bit later on. Especially when Buddah goes down, we saw Alex just take a little bit more of a role inside linebacker. We saw more X3 Alexander as well, but this is what we've been talking about with Alex since he got on campus in January. This is a guy who, now that he's over 200 pounds, he is just incredibly rangy. He knows how to make plays on the football. And I think that obviously we talked about the second interception and that being a tremendous play, but the first one was just so critical at such a nice point in time where that's the perfect, just result of what you want to see from this defense. You get pressure, Zach Durfee hits home, the ball gets tipped by Devin Bryant, and it falls into the hand of Alex McLaughlin where, he's in the right place at the right time. But he's proven through 3 games that he's going to be in the right place. And I think that's something that moving forward is going to be really important, where I was not impressed with the discipline on defense today, where that was something we talked about throughout the week was you need to stay disciplined in this rivalry game and not commit penalties. Rylan Diller down gets that big hit. It's immediately wiped out by a holding penalty. There are several other examples of, okay, this looks like it might have been solid. Nope, another penalty. Nope, another penalty. The numbers at the end of the game weren't jarring or anything like that. I want to be very clear about that. But all of the penalties seemed very, very untimely to say the least. And that's something moving forward, especially, again, next week against Ohio State, you can't have that. That's just unacceptable.
I think it was either Tony Castricone or Cam Clinton, whichever one said it on the game broadcast. They were felt. You felt the penalties, where it wasn't, 10, 12, yardage, and we're talking 150 plus, where those are a separate type of, you feel them. You might have 4 penalties in a game, but if you get impacted on all 4 in terms of maybe one's a touchdown or vice versa, those are the problems that you have to correct. And when you add to it, like you mentioned, the Ohio State game coming up, that margin of error against Wazoo is like this. You can't even see my hands on screen. Against Ohio State, that margin becomes very slim very quickly. And, UW has the talent to do it, but for whatever reason, it seems like in these rivalry games, understandably a little bit, there is a kind of gray line that players tend to cross. And I think when it comes to Ohio State next week, and it almost has to be treated like an Oregon game in a way where you cannot treat it any differently, but you also have to, because and one play can change the entire game. And obviously Alex did that like a couple of times today. But, you let those plays fester, or you figure them out and don't have them come up again. Now we get to find out which one's going to be.
So to your point, shout out to our buddy Nick Lemkow over at Last Word on College Sports, who just sent me a text and said Husky Stadium is going to be rocking next weekend for Ohio State. I can't wait to see that atmosphere is going to be like. But one thing that's going to be really crucial is if Buddah Al-Uqdah plays in that game. And we'll get to that in just a moment, right after a message from our friends over at Square. This episode is brought to you by Square because your favorite neighborhood spots run on Square. There are certain businesses that truly make the neighborhood feel like home. Whether it's the local sports bar packed on game days, the coffee shop that knows your order by heart, or the corner deli that's been serving your community for decades, these are the places that bring people together. When neighborhood businesses thrive, the whole neighborhood thrives. I love spending money at local businesses because it doesn't just support them, it supports the people behind it and the community around it. Those local spots are what make the neighborhood feel like home, and so many of them run on Square. Square is a proud partner of more than 4 million neighborhood businesses around the world. You can go to square.com/go/lockdowncollege to learn more. But before you do, go support your favorite neighborhood spot. You'll be happy you did. Square, see you in the neighborhood. We've also got a message from our good friends over at DoorDash. It's almost the weekend. Time to look back and crown this week's MVP on Who Delivered, powered by DoorDash. Just like you can win every Saturday with DoorDash Streaks, saving more every time you ordered, these players delivered when it mattered most. Let's break it down. For Washington, Jonah Coleman delivered in a big way. No surprise there. He's on a major streak with 3 straight multi-touchdown games to open the season and 104 yards in the receiving game today. When the pressure was on, he came through. No hesitation, no delay. And if you've been watching week after week, this performance wasn't a fluke. Jonah is on a streak. And just like Jonah delivered for the Huskies, DoorDash delivers your Saturdays. With DoorDash Streaks, you save every Saturday you order, stack it up all season, and you can save up to $250, including $100 in DoorDash credits. Order this Saturday, keep the streak alive, fuel your game day only with DoorDash. Terms apply, promo period through November 18th. Obviously, the big news coming out of the game is Buddah Al-Uqdah goes down with a knee injury. We saw him icing it over on the sidelines. It was nice to see him still involved in everything and hyping up his teammates, kind of hopping around on one leg. You certainly hope he's okay. I'm sure we'll get a further update from Jedd Fisch on his status on Monday when we get a chance to speak to him at his press conference. But the immediate results don't look good. We're not going to speculate on what the injury might be or anything like that, but this defense certainly takes a big hit without him.
It does, and I think, ironically enough, you had Jacob Manu out for this game as well, which maybe you just tag in, tag out. Like, that might be kind of the benefit there, and that's why getting 3 transfers was massive in the offseason, because you have Exree Alexander, like you mentioned earlier, booted the unfortunate injury, but then Jacob has always kind of been that X factor where he's coming off the ACL injury, didn't really need to be ready at the start of the season because of the guys they have. And by the way, shout out to Devin Bryant for getting that PB, the tip on Alex's first pick. So, he's also been doing a pretty good job this season. Not the greatest tonight, but, it was, again, good enough.
He led the team in tackles tonight, too. Sorry, I had to get that in there. He had 8 tackles tonight.
And so, again, he's the epitome of do your job is Devin Bryant. I think that's kind of, just what he hasn't really broken that ceiling, but he hasn't fallen back. But I think if you add Jacob into that mix, that might help out a lot. And so I think, it's a cause for concern. But when you look at the upper class depth there, because when you look behind them, there's not a ton there. I mean, Zadrius is coming back. You look at, the future looks pretty promising, but right now in 25, you're kind of hoping, hey, Jacob might be ready to go by Ohio State. So that way, if Buddah does have to miss some time, you don't lose that fall off.
So I'm glad you mentioned that. I was texting with our good buddy, Alex Katzen, who writes with us over at Huskies Wire right after that happened. And I said, Jacob Manu's timeline just got accelerated. And I think that's the thing where coming into the week, it was really good news to hear that he was going to be questionable for this week. I didn't think that there was, really a shot that he was going to play. He's still less than a year removed from that injury, but knowing that they're just putting that into consideration right now, I think is a really good sign for just the future of this linebacking core with or without Buddah. And that's a position where, sucks, but those players do get hurt a lot. It's just a heavy contact position. So having a deep and talented rotation there is great. And if Jacob Manu is able to suit up and play this Saturday, against Ohio State. That's going to be a big win. I don't think it fully replaces the loss of Buddah, who's just better in pass coverage versus Jacob Manu, who's just better against the run. But having that combination of guys is really important. I certainly don't expect to see Zydrunas Randy-Saleh until late October, early November at the absolute earliest. But when you just look at the way this rotation shapes up, I think that just adding a guy like that back to the mix would certainly just offset the loss of Buddah if he is out for any extended period of time in some sort of way. I don't know if it would necessarily be enough, but it just kind of brings me to one of the other things I wanted to make sure we discussed with this is, again, like I said in the last segment, Washington's rushing defense only allowed 27 yards today. But you look at the way some of these drives played out, and it was extremely frustrating to watch. It was just dink and dunk and dink and dunk, 3, 4, 5, 6 yards. Where, yeah, obviously I'm exaggerating a little bit. There are a couple plays that were longer than that. But you look at the way that this Wazoo offense was able to continually just march the ball down the field against this Ryan Walters defense. I feel like you need to see just some kind of switch up in how you're not necessarily just attacking, but how you're playing coverage on the back end. And I don't know how much of that is Tacario Davis being out, and I don't know how much of that is just trying to do different things and saying, we understand that Zevi Eckhouse does this well, so we want to force him to do that. I want to see it look a little bit different next Saturday.
I would say look a little cleaner, not necessarily different, because I think, the right concepts are in place, but, maybe a combination of right guys, wrong place, those sorts of things. But worth noting with that run defense, like you mentioned, I think that's kind of what's going to be paramount, because you look in the Big Ten, name me the quarterbacks that really concern you. Like, it's the rushing attacks that really, for me, are like, that's where we needed to see that improvement. Why, as I hinted at earlier, my lockdown prediction was 56 that they would hold them to, and that went even further south. So you talk about all those things. Like, I think that you're able to mend that bridge because you're not going to have a holistic change mid-season.
I want to be completely fair, though, because there are a lot of young, inexperienced quarterbacks in this conference. But in terms of arm talent, in terms of quarterbacks that concern me, Julian Sain is in that top 3. Like, I think that he has that kind of talent, and with that kind of receiving core, like, I just think that we're going to see a lot more press man, a lot more physicality and aggressiveness, and trying to throw off just routes and timing compared to, okay, we're going to let you beat us underneath and just not let you get away for big plays, which, still was not necessarily the case today. I think that that's a really big part of just kind of what Ryan Walters' defense has been, is he's good at, adjusting and finding different ways to force an offense to beat you. And very clearly today it was, we want to force Zevi Eckhouse to march an offense down the field and do it efficiently and just make clean passes. And he did that throughout the game. He did. So is that, acceptable? Not necessarily, but if that's the way that UW was willing to get beat, I feel like that's a different discussion. I want to switch gears here because we got a couple more things we want to get to before we get out of here. One of them is wide receiver 2. It was awesome seeing Omari Evans' first touch as a Husky, go 59 yards and a touchdown. Obviously, Jedd Fisch wanted to rub a little bit extra salt in the wound, but I'm really interested to see how this is going to shape up, because I look at just the target share today. Really curious. Outside of Jonah Coleman and Denzel Boston, who got 7 targets each, everybody else who logged a reception only had 1 target. So Damon had a truly efficient day, and I was very impressed with his performance. I'm just really intrigued to see who is going to step up as wide receiver 2, if it's going to be Omari, Desmond Roebuck, Raiden Weisbreit, because whoever it wasn't necessarily shown today.
Well, that's, as you mentioned that's what was ironic, because on the first drive, Raiden gets that catch, and it's like, cool, Raiden's going to get involved early. Awesome. It's a good sign. And then nothing else. Like you mentioned, Desmond Roebuck has been on a heater the last 2 weeks, like you and I have both been in some respect on our lockdown preview predictions. And then really didn't mention anything. Although, again, worth shouting out Desmond on the onside kick recovery there.
Absolutely.
Again, he doesn't really. And so I think that's where, however you impact the game, really, as long as it's a positive impact, you don't need to do too much. I mean, like we saw today, like did you don't need Raiden or Desmond to have a big catch day to beat Wazoo. No, you flat out didn't. Like you have the horses in the backfield, and even with Denzel, you got enough coverage there. But I do think when we talk about the likes of Ohio State, Michigan, Oregon, throw in some other games that you want to, Illinois, those are where those 3 receivers are going to come into play. I just wonder, like, where is Omari at? Obviously, like, again, fantastic on the play. Don't get me wrong. Not discrediting anything like that. but you might need more than one catch from him against Maryland, against Ohio State, just because
that's my point.
And with Rashid being out, that's kind of where I'm intrigued with the dynamic, because the talent's there. I just wonder if Jedd's leaning into where the success is coming, which is in the backfield. Let's be clear about that. Why not lean into it unless it stops?
So that's the whole thing, where you look at Ohio State next week, you know they can defend the run. So you need to find other ways to beat that team. You look again, you've chatted out all the right names, even though Illinois just got boat raced today by Indiana. You're still right. You're still 100% right there. I just want to throw that out there. But I just, my point is more, you know, that you're going to see a lot of just different kinds of coverages against from Ohio State against Denzel Boston. And I think as we continue to just let this season play out, this was kind of what we talked about earlier in the week with two true freshmen starting at wide receiver. Is it necessarily a bad thing? No, the coaching staff is more than confident in both these guys. They think that they're going to be tremendous players. So getting them on the field early is great. You like that. But at the same point, obviously they weren't necessarily overly needed today, like you said, but going down the line, it's more of if you get that experience in this game, which is why we were talking about them so much leading up to this contest, all of a sudden it doesn't look, it's not like, Braden Vinesbrand has 6 catches for 80 yards in his, first Big Ten road game or whatever against Maryland or something like that. He already has a little bit more experience under his belt. So I'm just curious to see how that's going to play out. We saw Audric Harris get into the game today and make a catch. That was nice to see. It's just more about this. And this was my point that I brought up on the Friday show as well. It's more about spreading the ball out and just seeing who is going to make plays for you and just finding a way to differentiate yourself from the Jedd Fisch offenses of 2021 through 2024, when all of your targets were funneled through 2 guys. You don't necessarily need to do that anymore with the talent you have in the room.
I agree with that. I just think it's going to be almost a game by game situation where whoever ends up emerging, I think you might still have an element of that 2 receiver problem, but it's going to be a different guy as that 2. And I think you might have it be where it's 1 plus 2 halves, and you get like a Kevin Green and a Omari Evans or a Desmond Roebuck. And by the way, Decker DeGraff. We're not even mentioning Decker's name in all this. I think certain games where he might shine. I think it's all that to say you have enough pieces, they can figure it out, but the consistency might be a concern. Do you want to add one more thing real quick? Shout out Grady Gross.
Oh yeah, no, Grady Gross was tremendous. Is that your final thought? I was going to say, if you have any final thoughts, please.
Well, I was going to say I do, because that was my final, because Grady's previous long of 47 is now done, the 51-yarder. I think that Grady, by the way, cleared that with some ease there. So I think having Grady make that 50-plus yarder should give him a lot of confidence moving forward, because maybe just a hunch, a field goal ends up deciding next week's Ohio State game.
I mean, hey, we'll get to that in about 6 days right here on Locked On Huskies. Before we get out of here, though, I do have a final thought that I want to get out there. You covered it briefly a couple minutes ago. I want to circle back around to it. Shout out to Armon Parker for getting his first career sack after 3 years worth of season-ending injuries. Seeing him on the field on a consistent basis has been really, really tremendous. And I tweeted about it after the game, and it was really cool. As soon as the players got to the locker room, it was very clear that Javon Parker was super excited for his brother. He went and was liking all the tweets about him and sent me a nice response saying, I'm so happy for my brother. Seeing those guys back out on the field together at some point down the line is not only going to have a big impact on this defense, but I think that's just going to be a really cool thing to see for those 2 extremely talented guys in the middle of the scheme. And I couldn't be more excited to see what that's going to look like. But Lars, that's all we got today. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you to all you everydayers for tuning in, especially you guys in the comments. It really does mean a lot. And we hope you enjoyed the show. And if you did, please make sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating this channel with new content every single day. So please make sure you click that like button, click that little bell so you never miss when we post a new show. Plus, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, drop them right down below in the comment section. And if you're audio only, please give us a 5-star review, as it does help us out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you on Monday.